The touring production of To Kill a Mockingbird is coming to Chicago. It's going to be at the Nederlander Theater, May 17th through the 29th. We have one of the stars here, Stephen Lee Johnson, here joining me today to talk all about it. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Let's first go ahead and talk a little bit about the novel. What was your first experience in reading it, and a little bit of the impact that it had on you?
Sure. So the novel totally eluded me through grade school, middle school, high school, college. I was one of those like rare kids where I just fell through the cracks and I never read it. And then I was coming out of grad school and I had one of my first auditions out of school, and it was to cover Jem and Dill in the Broadway production of Mockingbird. So I ran to the Brooklyn Public Library. I found the book, took it home. I devoured it in 2 days, and I totally fell in love with it. And I also had it in the context of the Sorkin script. So it was a unique way in because I was looking at it right with the idea of auditioning for Jem and Dill. So I was looking at it through kind of their eyes. And I also was kind of already comparing Sorkin's lens versus Harper's lens, which was a really cool way to do it. So I didn't have the experience of having it as a kid, which sometimes makes me sad, but I also got to see it with such fresh eyes as an adult, which was a total gift.
I mean, you just told me that, that you were auditioning for a role and got to read it in 2 days, but this is really the novel that a lot of people have picked up that really got them into the hobby of reading. And because it was such a fascinating read, that this is one of those books that got people, they sped right through it. Or, if you had to read it in school, you didn't read just the 3 chapters. You're like, I got to get ahead because I got to see how this ends. I mean, this book means so much to so many people.
I mean, it's a cultural phenomenon that's sort of unparalleled, and especially in terms of just the generational continuation of it. It's not like it just appealed to my grandparents' generation, my parents' generation. It's still resonating today, which I think speaks to the talent of Harper Lee's writing, and it also speaks kind of sadly to the relevance of the themes.
And also the world that we're living in right now, because it doesn't necessarily feel like this was written, decades ago. It feels like it could be freshly written, right now and still have just as much urgency as it did, back when it first came out.
Sadly, that's true.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the stage production. How's it laid out? Let's talk about the character of Dill and, what's it like to bring this show to audiences.
Sure. So the biggest shift from the book is the book really focuses on Scout as a pure protagonist and the sort of sole narrator. In this production, Aaron Sorkin has expanded the narration to not just Scout, but also to Jem and Dill. So we all kind of like are carrying the ball together of the narration. It also focuses more on Atticus as an imperfect protagonist who undergoes a change throughout the play. So it's a pretty significant shift in perspective and in storytelling technique from the book. But people who love the book are still going to get the story they remember. They're just going to get it in a totally new way.
What messages have you gotten on social media, or, I know people are social distancing, so the stage door experience is not really happening so much right now, but what are people saying as far as kind of going in with like, oh, I know the book, and getting to see this new updated version and, their experience with that?
The thing that I hear most often is how resonant it feels in 2022. And I think that's a confluence of things. For one, the themes are just as sadly universal as ever, but beyond that, Aaron Sorkin really listened to the time that we were living in. And if you listen closely and look closely, there's little contemporary things sprinkled in that completely can live in that world, but are little hints at our time today. So I think it's holding up more of a mirror than people assumed. I think people think that they're going to go and watch this play about another time and another place, and they can feel almost better about how different things are. And instead, I think a mirror is held up, and it's both an important thing for people to investigate within themselves, and also a challenge for the audience and a gauntlet that's thrown down.
Let's talk a little bit about Richard Thomas in this show. Some people know him from the Walton. Some people know him from the Stephen King miniseries It. He's on Ozark. Last time he was in Chicago was for The Humans a couple of years ago. So a lot of ways that people come, to love this man.
I was cast, Richard was already cast as Atticus on the tour. And an actor in the Broadway company took me aside and he said, I've worked with Richard for decades, and you will not find a more generous, kind actor in this country. And I remember just thinking, now my expectations have been raised unrealistically high. I'm probably not going to get along with him because I'm going to have him on this pedestal. And he is, I am not kidding. He is one of the most generous, kind actors and people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And it totally shines through in the rehearsal room, on lunch breaks, on coffee breaks, but it also shines through in his Atticus. There's an empathy to his Atticus. There's an emotional intelligence to his Atticus that are completely part of Richard that just have to imbue the character. He can't, I think he can't help it. And it has completely opened up parts of the play that I'm seeing in totally new ways. It's totally changed the way that I play some scenes as Dill, which has been a total gift, right? Because in some ways it's a new production. The words are the same, but the play is different with different humans. So he's a cultural phenomenon to my parents' generation, and I didn't know him from the Waltons. To me, I knew him as a kind of like really stalwart stage actor who I'd watched in Little Foxes and other shows on Broadway. But now to be working with him day to day, I can see why he's so beloved by the generations above me. And I'm just so thrilled to see young people in the audience getting to experience such a wonderful talent for the first time.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I'm sure Ozark brings in some of the newer fans.
I was about 2 weeks into rehearsal and I was on a 10-minute break, and my mom was calling me on my cell phone. I said, "Hey, Mom," and she goes, "You didn't tell us he was on Ozark." And my parents were, and yeah, I think that has opened him up. The Americans as well has opened him up to newer generations. But to see him on stage is also just a different element of his talent. He's an incredible film actor, but he's also a master of stage. I've learned so much watching him. So I think it's a gift to get to watch him on Ozark because he has unbelievable talent on screen, but he's been owning theater for decades and decades and decades. And it shows. And I think, a rising tide lifts all boats, and he certainly lifts all boats in every way.
Well, we are so excited to have you back in our city, May 17th through the 29th, To Kill a Mockingbird at the Nederlander Theater. BroadwayInChicago.com is where you can go ahead and get those tickets.